Okay, so this is going to be the directions for our group 1 activity, or excuse me, our group 2 activity here, which is going to be completing the basic quiz review part for this lesson. All right, so in this case, we're going to go ahead and open that up. Using Adobe Acrobat, we are going to create the following part. Okay, so now looking at this, we've got a couple ways we can approach this problem. The way I look at this problem here is I'm going to try and start with a base piece on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and get this all set up, starting with a simple rectangle, and go ahead and include my slot within that rectangle so I can get that cut in one spot. I'm then going to click on this front side view right here, and I'm going to add on this tombstone looking shape and extrude it in an additional 10 millimeters this way. Once I've done that, I'll add in my hole wizards, finish off with my fillet tool, and we'll call this one completed. So I'm going to go ahead and get my SolidWorks up and running, do a file new, and one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to go back and check what are my units. For this one, I see a metric at the corner indicating that we're using metric parts, or metric units, in this case millimeters. So going back into SolidWorks, I'm going to start it by opening a metric part and say OK. Now as this loads up here, I'm going to go back and quickly show where I want to go here. So I'm going to start actually from the top plane, and I'm going to create a simple rectangle with a slot in the middle of it. I'm going to extrude that rectangle down a total distance of 10. So going into SolidWorks, I'm going to highlight my top plane, go to Sketch, and turn on my Sketch toolbar. I'm going to go ahead and use a corner rectangle. Attaching to the origin, I'm going to create a rectangle. Now, looking at the length of this, it looks like the length will be 100 by 40. So turning on my Smart Dimension tool, I will dimension the side here to 100 and the side over here to 40. Hit my F key. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw my slot in here. That way I can save a step of extrude cut. So I'm going to turn my slot tool real quick here. Draw a slot across the part horizontally. Left click the second time and create a thickness to my slot. Now what I want to do here is I want to come back and dimension this. Now this dimension from the center of the slot to the edge will be 20. From the center of the slot right side arc here to the right side will be 25. And from center to center will be 50. So let's go ahead and dimension that to its correct spot. Put in my Smart Dimension from this center line to the edge is going to be 20. And again, notice I am putting my dimensions in exactly the same spot as the drawing, because I'm going to use my model items here later on in the drawing, and if I do this correctly here, the dimension should drop in exactly the same spot. I'm going to go from the center to the side right here, make that 25, and then I believe from center to center was 50, and it was. So I'm going to go from center to center and type in 50. Now I need to also add in the radius of the arc right here, and looking at that, it's going to be a radius of 5. So I'm going to go to here, out, and make it a radius of 5. Now from here, I'm going to go to my Features toolbar, and I'm going to extrude this out at 10 millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead at this point, everything looks good, 10 millimeters, and hit my check mark. Now looking at the part, I see that it's blue. That's a great indication that I don't have material added. So I need to edit my material here. Looking at this part right here, it looks like the material is going to be a 1060 aluminum alloy. So I'm going to go back into SolidWorks, go to Material in my design tree, right click, and edit. Minimize steel and expand out my aluminum alloys and find the 1060 alloy, which is the first one at the top. Apply and close. Now, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit this face right here. And we're going to create a sketch that looks like this tombstone shape right here. Now, in the end, I will add all my fillets on at the very end of this problem. I'm going to do the fillets as the last step. So I'm going to go ahead, highlight this face, and we're just going to create a straight tombstone looking shape, and then extrude that in 10 millimeters. So going into my SolidWorks, highlight that face right here and start a new sketch. Spacebar, normal to. Turn on your Smart Dimension tool, and starting at this flat line right here, I'm going to use a little trick with my line tool by pulling up, pull away from the line, come back and tap the endpoint to create the arc. Left click to pull another straight line, left click and close. Now, I need to dimension this to define it. So it looks like the height of this, in this case, the center of the arc right here will be 35 high and 50 to the outside edge. So, turning on my Smart Dimension, from the center to the bottom will be 35 millimeters. From the center to the side will be 50 millimeters. The size of the arc, I gotta look at this, is going to be a radius of 20. So I will then take my dimension tool and hit my arc and make that R20. Now, it's fully defined. I can see that by the black lines. I can also see it by saying fully defined at the bottom. I am now going to hit my spacebar in isometric view, and I'm going to turn on my features toolbar and hit Boss Extrude. Now the problem is, if you look carefully, I need to extrude this 10 millimeters, but right now it's going the wrong direction. So to get it to go the correct direction, over here under direction 1, next to the word blind, I'm going to hit the double arrow for the reverse direction. Now that it looks good, I'm going to go ahead and hit my check mark. So now from an isometric view, this is what I'm looking at. So now what I want to do is I want to come in here, I'm going to add in this first hole wizard. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this one here, then I'll add these two, and we'll finish off with our fillet tool. So right now, this one here, if I look in this view, is what we call a counterbore. A counterbore is a hole with a flat bottom that is basically allows us to sink a bolt into this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these numbers here as my guide. I'm using the 9, the 18, and the 6 when I go ahead and size this. So I'm going to have to turn my hole wizard on to make this happen. So what I'm going to start with is go to my features toolbar and go to hole wizard. Now the hole wizard's on, I'm going to start by picking the counterbore. That is the first choice in the first row. In this case, we've got to make sure our units are correct. So our standards should say Isometric. Hex bolt is fine. Size, don't care. What I'm going to do is go here where it says custom sizing, and now I'm going to plug in my numbers that I see in this note right here. I'm going to plug in a 9, an 18, and a 6. So I'm going to go back to SolidWorks. I'm going to plug in a 9, an 18, and a 6. I want this countersink to go all the way through, so I'm going to make sure that my in condition is through all. Now that I have it all defined, I need to place my hole wizard. So I'm going to go up here to the Positions tab and left click. What it says is select the face for the hole or slot position. Well, I would like this hole on this face, so I'm going to left click to indicate this is where I want it. Now I'm going to go ahead and do a space bar and a normal 2 so I can see this straight on. I'm going to bring this hole and left click approximately at the middle of this part. Now you'll notice your tool is still active. To turn it off, click your escape key. Now I need to place this by using my Smart Dimension tool, because right now, if you look in the corner, it says it's underdefined. I can also tell by the asterisk symbol right there that it's blue. So let's look at what we have over here in our PDF file. It looks like that's going to be 35 high and 50 to the middle. So in this case, I'm going to go from this point here to the bottom and go 35 high. And from this center point to the right, I'm going to go 50 to the middle. Now you'll notice this is fully defined. So to finish this, all I have to do is hit my green check mark. Spacebar, isometric. Now, going to this top face here, I'm going to use my hole wizard one more time. So I'm going to go up here and I want to add in these two holes. Now these two holes show a dashed line around them. As you recall in class, we talked about when we see a hole with a dashed circle around it, it indicates that it is a tapped hole. So we're going to use our straight tapped hole wizard to create these two holes and using this information right here. So I'm going back to SolidWorks. I'm going to go back to my features and do a hole wizard. I'm going to do this straight tapped hole right here, straight tap, first box, second row. I'm going to go ahead and reset my custom sizing values. I'm going to make sure I'm an Isometric, and I'm going to do a tapped hole. Now the size of this hole is going to be told by this note right here. And what this tells me is I have a hole that is M10 by 1.5 big. So I'm going to drop this down where it says size to an M10 by 1.5. I'm going to make sure my custom sizing is showing. In this case, through all is fine because the note tells me that these are through all and through all. So in this case, if I go back to here, to here, I see through all and through all. Now the big thing is take the with cosmetic thread off. I want to make sure all these white boxes are clean. And I want to make sure the middle box is checked on. With that set up, what I want to do now is go to my Positions tab and put these two holes in the correct spot. The first thing I'm going to do is highlight the face I want the holes on. So I'm going to click this face here. I'm going to do a space bar and a normal 2 so I can see this a little bit better. And basically, approximately in each corner, I'm going to left click and create 2 of these screw holes. And when I'm done, to turn off the tool, I'm going to hit Escape. Now at this point, these are showing under defined, and both of these asterisk symbols are showing blue. So what I need to do is use my Smart Dimension tool to get this fully defined. So looking at this node up here, it looks like it's going to be 8 from the center of this circle will be 8 from this top line and 8 from this right line, and these two circles will be horizontal to each other and a distance of 84 millimeters. So going back in here with my Smart Dimension tool, I'm going to go ahead and click on this center and this right line and pull up, make that 8. From the center to the top line, pull to my right, make that 8. From this center to this center will be 84. And then last but not least, I'm going to get out of my Smart Dimension tool, but I want to make these two centers horizontal to each other. So I will hold my Control key down and click on the 2 dots and make them horizontal. Now you'll see where it says down here, fully defined. Both of these center points are black, which means the part is ready to go. I'm going to hit my green check mark. Spacebar isometric, and there are our views. Now at this point, what I want to do is go ahead and round off these corners. I'm going to go ahead and add my fillets, and then we'll finish off with this cut. I always forget about this cut at the bottom. This is why you want to pay attention to all 3 of your views. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and round off the 4 corners. These 4 corners are going to have a radius of R8. The tool I will use for this will be our Feature Fillet tool. So go into SolidWorks, go to my Features, and turn on my Fillet tool. Change the distance from 8 millimeters, the radius from 8, or 10 millimeters, to a radius of 8. And now I'm going to come out and click on each of these vertical lines in the 4 corners to round off this piece. Hit your green check mark. Now what I want to do is round off all these edges. And what I'm talking about is if you look at this drawing, I need to round off all of this upper surface and all of this tombstone front and back. That radius is going to be R3 for all of those fillets. So going here, I'll go back to my fillet tool under the feature toolbar. And instead of 8 here, I will change it to 3. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to this edge and start by clicking there. And you'll see that it shows you a preview. I'm going to hit this edge here. You'll see that it went all the way around and connected. Then I'm going to come here and hit this edge here. and this edge here. I'm then going to come to this side and hit this edge here. And so when you're done, you should see yellow indication all the way around this base on both sides of my tombstone. As soon as you see this look right here, hit your check mark. So now I have all my fillets. At this point, if we look back here, I have all this done except for the cut down here below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this front face down here, and we are going to create this cutout. So going here to my SolidWorks, I'm going to highlight this front face and start a new sketch. Spacebar, normal to. Now what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to draw a straight line. I'm basically going to start from the right side here and pull across. I'm going to pull away and tap my line. Pull a curve, pull away, and close my curve down here. Now, in order to make this fully defined, a couple things you need to understand. Whenever you have a curve and a line coming together, we need to add a tangent relationship. So I'm going to hold my control key, hit this line, hit this, this arc and this line, hold my control key, and add a tangent relationship. I'm going to do that to both sides. So I'm going to take this curve here, control key, this flat line here, control key, and tangent. Now this one here, I don't want locked on. This should not have locked on. I don't know why it did, but it did. So I'm going to highlight that right there and delete it off so I can pull this down a little bit lower. Notice that both of my center marks for both of my arcs are below the bottom line. Now looking at the dimensions, it looks like this is going to be a radius of 8 with a height of 3. This edge will be 30 in and a 40 distance between them. So turning on my smart dimension, I'll go from the edge here to this edge here and make that 30. From this edge to this edge will be 40. This will be a radius of 8. And the height here will be 3. Now everything looks good except for one thing. I don't see this being defined. Reason being is I need to make this arc here, control key, and this arc here equal to each other. And now I see it fully defined. From here, I will do a features, an extruded cut, and we'll make this cut go through all. Hit your check mark, spacebar isometric view, and your part is now complete. So now we want to make sure we save it. So I'm going to do a file, save as. I'm going to call this basic quiz review or quiz review basic part. It's up to you. Underscore your last name. Now we're going to pull up our evaluate tab and do our mass properties. The mass properties for this I have as 115.70 grams. I'm going to go ahead and print this. Make sure you select the correct printer, which will be an L108. Say OK, and then close out your mass properties, go to the printer, and collect your mass property sheet. Now as soon as you've got your mass property sheet and brought it back to your table, let's go ahead and set up the final drawing. We need the drawing to look like this one here. Now you should know right away this is an Ametric border that we're going to be putting this on. So I'm going to go here to SolidWorks and do a File New, and we are going to do a GHS Ametric and say OK. My part shows up in the open documents. So at this point, I'm going to go to the arrow that says Next, and I'm going to set up my drawing the way we have the last several. Starting with a front view by clicking the center box, turn on my preview, make sure my hidden lines are visible, and then just check the scale here, and the scale should be at 1 to 1. So at 1 to 1, I'm going to go, excuse me, the left corner and left click, pull up, left click, pull to my right, left click, and pull up an isometric and left click. Hit the check mark to end this. I'm going to take my metric right here and drop this down, and then I'm going to delete this box right here. Now I don't want to lose these two center lines, so I'm going to make sure those don't get deleted too. And I'm going to take this metric and highlight it and go where it says border here and it says none, and drop it down to the word box. Now I'm going to change this one here to color. I'm going to go ahead and soften it up so I don't see the black lines. I'm also going to change the scale from 1 to 1 to 1 to 2. I want to make sure I highlight all the black lines and hit delete. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple things on here before I add my titles and my model items. First, I need to add some center marks to my slot. So under annotation, I'm going to go to my center mark tool. I'm going to click on one of the slots. Now, as we've seen in the past, it will always drop it to the middle on default. But if you look to your left, I want you to go where it says slot center marks and do slot ends. You'll see the lines come in between. If it doesn't, go ahead and click this line right here, this box right here, so the line attaches them. Hit your green check mark. We need to also add in a center mark like this one here. So I'm going to go back to SolidWorks, turn on our center mark tool. I'm going to click on one of these arcs. Now in this case, I want to make sure that we have a slot ends. No, maybe that won't work. In this case, I'm going to click each of these right here, but I don't need the extended lines. So to turn off the extended lines, we're going to go over here to the left where it says Display Attributes, uncheck Document Defaults, uncheck your extended lines. Hit your green check mark. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and add my note to this part right here, and I'm going to use the trick of highlighting all of this title here, doing a Control-C to copy it, and then going into SolidWorks, Drawing, Annotation and Toolbar, and hit my Note tool. I'm going to drop my note right below, and when I see the cursor flashing inside the white box, Control-V. I'm going to highlight this top line and do an underline. Now at this point, you want to come in here and change your number to whatever mass is on your mass property sheet. Do not leave it as XXX.XX. It's an automatic 3-point deduction in the problem. I'm also going to come back in here and highlight this top line and make sure it's also underlined. So that part is done. Now what I want to do is stick on all my dimensions. So I'm going to go up here to the left under the annotation toolbar, and I'm going to pick the word Model Items. Now when I do this, I want to make sure I set two things up. First, Source. Change it to Entire Model. Second, turn on all these extra buttons. Leave the first one and the second row off, but turn on all these buttons. They should all be gray. Should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these showing gray. As soon as you have those, hit your green check mark and all the dimensions should drop into your drawing. So there are all my dimensions. Now it's obvious I'm going to have to make some adjustments. For instance, the R8 right here, I will flip the arrowhead inside, and I believe I'm trying to look at how I set this up. I'm going to try to pull this in a little bit. That works, maybe not. Pull the 40 down a little bit lower with the 30 and grab the R8 and pull it up. Okay? I'm going to add in the 3mm. Actually, I don't have to. I'm just going to bring this in between and put it right there. The 10 looks good here. I have two 35, so I'm going to take one of them and delete them off and slide it in a little bit. I see 250, so I'm going to highlight one and delete the other. That looks good there. My radius 20 is going to be over this way. I'm just going to check real quick if there's any notes. There isn't. I'm going to take this note tool here of my circle and bring it over here to the left so it matches this PDF file. Now the one thing I don't see is the R3TYP. So I'm going to go here and do my smart dimension, click on this right here, and add in the white dimension text box a TYP. I'm going to flip the arrowhead over, and now this view has been completed. Double check you have all the center lines you're supposed to have. That one looks good. There should be no dimensions on the right side view. So let's take a look at the right side. It looks good. So the only thing I have left to do is this top view. The 8 looks good. I'm going to bring it a little bit tighter, and the 84 looks good. This 8 looks good, 40, and this 10 looks good. All right, the R8 is going to get a TYP at the end. The 100 looks good. The R3 I will delete. Okay, this right here, I don't know why it looks this way, but I'm going to go ahead. In this case, we got to add in some dimensions, so I'll bring this down. So in this case, what I'm going to do is take my smart dimension tool and dimension from here to this line here and get my 20, widen out my 40. From this line here to here, oops, no, excuse me. From this line, from this arc, excuse me, to the side here will be 25. From this arc to the right to this arc to the left will be 50. I will see a radius of 5 over here. Now this right here, I'm going to delete off right now. Hit delete, and I'm going to use my whole callout tool right here and click on this line over here. That way it fits a little bit better. Now at this point, I'm just going to slide this over a little bit. Slide this view over a little bit along with my title. That looks fine. And at this point, all I have left to do is to go in and adjust my title block. This part is now complete. So going back into here, I want to make sure I have Quiz Review Basic Part as my title. So I'm going to double click SolidWorks Drawing and put in all caps Quiz Review. Basic Part. I'm going to go here and make sure I put my first initial last name. Today's date. The period. And a scale 1 to 1. At this point, I can simply go to File Save, say Save All, save it into your 3D Parts CAD folder, and hit Save. As soon as you have this done, go ahead and do a file print. Make sure you're printing to L108 and say OK. Take your mass properties and staple it to the back side of this paper in the upper left corner and put your part into the collection box. At this point, you're done with this part. Tune into the YouTube channel in a second here to see the next part coming up. Good luck. If you have any questions, please ask.